Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Steel Studio Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick.
We have a very special episode today dedicated to Mike Webster, one of the best Steelers to ever play the game.
Yeah, growing up as a kid, he was one of my favorites. I got my 1976 Iron City here with number 52 right there, Mike Webster. He was Iron Mike, heart and soul of the team, and handed that ball off to Bradshaw many times. Four Super Bowls.
Yep, he was a leader known for helping Bradshaw quite a bit on the field, and he was instrumental in our Super Bowls from 74 to 79.
Yeah, Hall of Famer, and in fact Bradshaw introduced him at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
and he was a man of few words. So I found his son Garrett, and who was there and part of his life, and we got the chance to interview him to find out a little bit about Mike and what it was like to be a Steeler and what it was like to grow up as a pro football player's son, and it's a good interview.
Yeah, it is. So I guess without further ado, we won't keep you waiting. Here's our special edition of Steel Studio with Mike Webster.
One of the things he loved to do was during the cold weather days is come out in no sleeves. To him, that was intimidating to those guys that didn't like to be in the cold weather. Mike came in and he had the daunting task of having to deal with Ernie Holmes every day. And Ernie, quite frankly, was killing him. Then, one day, Ernie couldn't move him. And I thought that, well, Ernie, what's going on? He said, well, he's gotten a little stronger. And Ernie went at him again, nothing happened. I said, oh, he's not that strong, let me have it. And I hit Mike, tried to throw him, nothing happened.
From the practice field battles with his steel curtain teammates, center Mike Webster was forged into a four-time Super Bowl champion and the anchor of Pittsburgh's offensive line.
Mike has played more games than anyone in Steeler history and more consecutive games than anyone in Steeler history. In a tough position, being in the middle of the line where he's always getting contact. When I think about Mike, I see them breaking the huddle. Mike runs up to the vault. He always does that. He's huffing and puffing, he's blowing. Then you see him in pass protection, pump the arms and get back, looking around, seeing where the threats were coming from.
You don't really appreciate it till it's over because of the intense concentration on the element of the moment. You're always concentrating on carrying that over, and you don't really want to do anything that might make it more difficult for yourself by patting yourself on the back and doing that type of thing.
Mike knew who to block, when to block, who to help. I think Mike even called plays at times, helping the quarterback.
I said, give me a winner. Give me somebody I can count on. Somebody that'll tell me, Terry, no, don't run this play. Mike did. Somebody help me get the team in line. Mike did it. Mike controlled it. We needed him. We used him. We leaned on him. He was our strength. Let me put my hands on the Mike Webster's butt just one more time.
So I'm Rick Mooney, and my son Mike. You there, Mike?
Yep.
And we're from the Steel Studio Podcast, and we're interviewing Garrett Webster, the son of legendary Hall of Famer Mike Webster, one of my favorite players growing up, one of my heroes growing up. So this is an honor to talk to you, sir, and we appreciate you taking the time. So you tell us.
It's an honor to be on.
Yeah. Tell us about your dad and just a brief summary of your dad and his career and the Steelers, what you think of all that.
Oh, so I'm doing the work for you here. I see how it is. Okay.
Oh, we'll have lots of questions. Just a brief.
You guys were trying to get Dermontti Dawson, and I was the second pick. I understand.
No, absolutely not.
Totally
You were my
cool.
first thought, man.
But yeah, no, I do better with questions like like my dad. I'm not very good with talking about myself or he is, because I know he was the same way. So
yeah.
Usually I'm the best with just sort of asking me whatever you want to know or anything I could fill in the blanks for or anything like that, and then usually I'll just run with it and talk, and feel free to tell me to shut up when I've talked too much.
That's fine. So, Mike, you want to start off?
Sure, yeah. Garrett, are you still a Steelers fan by chance?
I am. We went through, growing up, and I was actually talking to somebody about this today. Dad was not somebody who, I don't want to say took his work home, because obviously he, did a lot of working out and all that kind of stuff. And I remember him using the blocking sled in the front yard and going for runs and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't make a big deal that he was a football player, even when, he got recognized out in public and stuff like that. So, growing up, it was almost like there was an opposite effect with the Steelers. We didn't think of Dad as being a football player, and especially not any kind of a big deal. You certainly wouldn't then think about the team that he played for, and obviously, I was only about 4 or 5 when he left the Steelers. So growing up, I really didn't think about Pittsburgh. I remembered him playing for Kansas City, and Kansas City was kind of my team growing up. I loved Marty Schottenheimer and Carl Peterson back then, and the weird thing is there is a lot of links between the Chiefs and the Steelers in a lot of different ways, with coaches who went back and forth. Marty Schottenheimer, he was the head coach, and Bill Cowher was his, I believe, special teams coach. Herm Edwards was there. Tony Dungy was a coach for Kansas. No, Mike Tomlin wasn't a coach for Kansas City. And there's somebody else that I'm forgetting too that was a big coach that worked for the Chiefs there for a while and worked for the Steelers. But like I said, growing up, I kind of rooted for Kansas City. And I was a big Joe Montana fan. Me and my dad would always have those father and son arguments between who was better, Joe Montana or Terry Bradshaw and stuff like that. But I did that, and then unfortunately, when Dad started to struggle and stuff like that, and because none of us in the family and him, him as well, didn't understand what was going on. We were kind of, I don't want to say bitter towards the Steelers. It was just sort of misplaced anger on everything that had gone on and everything that had gone wrong. And but we still kind of, it's funny, my dad would be angry. Because again, like I said, he didn't understand what was happening, so he'd be kind of place some of his anger there at the Steelers. But if the Steelers were on TV or something like that, he'd always kind of pay attention to what they were doing, especially Dermontti and the offensive line. He'd always pay attention to that.
I think Dermontti's rookie year was your dad's last year with the Steelers, I believe.
Yeah, and they drafted him as a guard, and that's what they wanted to play him as. And Dad was very adamant that they move him to center. Because, Dad would always tell me, he would always go crazy when he'd see these guards getting drafted in the first round and stuff. And he'd say, you can find a guard anywhere, centers and tackles are, the baseline of the offensive line, because, Dermontti could move, he could get out there, he was great technique and he was a hard worker and stuff like that. So, Dad would always pay attention to those. And then sort of, after Dad passed away, I think, we kind of were removed enough from the situation, and as we understood kind of what happened, with the science and all that kind of stuff, and especially being back in the area, because after Dad passed away, I went back to Wisconsin for just, a couple years there to, help my mom out, and, kind of, at that weird stage where everybody's at 19 or 20, where they're trying to figure out kind of what they want to do and, all that stuff. I came back out, and, the people and everything like that, and we also always remembered that Dad and our family were at our happiest when we were in Pittsburgh and Dad was with the Steelers. And so, I definitely kind of fell back into being a Steeler fan, and I mean, I've always been a sports fan my whole life. I was the sports fan in the family, the rest of my family, they can kind of take or leave sports, they have other interests and stuff like that. But, I was the sports geek in the family. So, I definitely hooked to rooting for the Steelers pretty well, and I root for them now and watch them, and just like every Steelers fan, one minute I root for them, the next minute I swear them off and say I'm never going to watch another game, and but that's the fun of being a fan, it's you live and die with them, and that's the funnest way to do it.
So I watched your dad's Hall of Fame speech today again. It's been a while, but he was fond of Lamar Hunt and the Rooneys. So did he ever talk about Chuck Noll to you?
He did. I think that the one thing with Chuck that he always kind of adamantly talked about is he was always angry, and it still doesn't make any sense to me. And obviously being since my dad played for Chuck and stuff like that, I have a little bit of a bias there, but. Dad would always be so angry when they talk about all these other coaches, and they would never talk about Chuck Noll, right. and they would just kind of just leave him out of every, it was always Bill Walsh or, George Seifert or he had a great respect for Vince Lombardi, obviously being a Wisconsin kid
right.
and stuff like that. But, he always, was, and he was like that with all of his teammates or coaches or anything, anytime any of them didn't get mentioned, he was not happy at all. But, he talked about Chuck a lot. I think that, from what Mom said, you have the thing when you're a player and even if you're an 8th grade football player, you always think you're no better than the coach, it's, we should have run this play here and stuff like that, and Mom said Dad would say those kinds of things. But again, it wasn't that, hold any ill will or something like that. It was just that competitive nature. We should have done this or we should have done that.
Sure.
But he had a great deal of respect for Chuck Noll. And I think that Dad was one of those guys that was not a rah guy. He wasn't a,
Chuck was the same way.
Game. Yeah. And that's, but I think the thing too is Chuck let guys be the way they wanted to be. You looked at, Lynn Swan, Stallworth, a lot of the, you let the defense have that swagger that they had. But also guys wanted to be just nice and quiet and, take care of business and stuff like that. He was fine with that too. And I think the other thing Dad really respected about Chuck is, he was more than just a football guy. He, from everybody, and I only got to meet Chuck Noll one time, and that was at my dad's funeral. But, from everything that I've heard, Chuck was one of those kind of odd birds that, would read books outside of football. He would, everybody's heard stories about him with, paintings and bird watchings and all this other kind of stuff.
The opera.
I think Dad liked that in him, because Dad, he did like football and stuff like that. And, he was, he did love to play, even though he treated it as a, kind of like a job, I guess you could say, but he did enjoy it. And, but he also had a lot of interest outside of, football. Dad loved to read. Dad loved to, he'd do things that you think, he's an offensive lineman, they're big, dumb guys and stuff like that. But, no, Dad loved to read. He loved to, not investigate in that, kind of weird conspiracy theory way, but learn more about stuff, I guess is the best way to put it. And
so that Hall of
Fame
was
in Chuck.
I'm sorry. So the Hall of Fame day, you remember that? I think that was you that was there. I saw in the video. There.
Yeah. No, our
and that had to be a big day for him, huh?
Well, it was, obviously, Dad got in a second year of eligibility, which was something that, he was always kind of a little upset about. It was one of the few times I ever remember him showing some kind of, I don't want to say, because I don't think it was ego. I think everybody would agree that he should have got in his first time, but, he, was a little hurt by that, I think. But like I said, growing up, we never really thought of Dad being a football player. And we certainly didn't think he was any kind of a big deal. Dad didn't either. He never, walked around, and especially living back in Wisconsin, where we lived, he wasn't, if anything, he was looked down upon. So when we came out to that, not just for me, but, it was the last time I can really remember, not just the immediate family of me and my brothers and sisters and Dad and stuff like that, but, all of the extended family too were there. And I think it was the first time, at least for me personally, I can say that I realized my dad was, a famous player, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And, I remember seeing, the fans with the, Mr. Mike signs and the,
Iron Mike.
Some sweet old lady did a 52 Afghan, which she actually sent us afterwards, and we still have.
Wow.
She knitted it and stuff like that. But, we did that. I think Dad, too, and if you watch a speech, you can see sort of, it's obviously with the, concussions and stuff, you could tell where he starts to get a little off track. But also, I think he got to a point where he got a little uncomfortable speaking about himself.
Right.
And
he was very humble.
And sometimes that's, it's great to be humble, but it's, one of the things that, let's just say, contributed to some of the problems that he had is feeling good about yourself, let's just say. And, I think that at that Hall of Fame speech, Dad, it really meant a lot to him to see the teammates that were there and, see the fans and stuff like that, and be able to share that with us as his kids and stuff like that. It's something that, I think he really did treasure. He really did like. I remember he really loved the fact that when he got in the Hall of Fame, I think they still do this. I don't know if they do or not, but they flew you out to Hawaii and they put you up in a hotel and you got to stay like a week in Hawaii and stuff. And I remember my dad being just so excited about that for, take his kids on a vacation,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I remember that whole time and it being, him, obviously that was really where things started to come to light with the difficulties my dad was having, was around that time with the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
But he still greatly, enjoyed, I guess you could say, that last sort of touch with, his old career, let's just say.
Were he and Terry Bradshaw pretty tight? Pretty good friends?
The weird thing is about that team is all of them kind of, when they left the stadium or wherever, they all kind of went about their separate lives. But, Dad was always extremely protective of Terry. He was always extremely, Mom would say that, if you had to say a best friend Dad had on the team, it was until, obviously you got some more characters on the offensive line like Steve Corson and Tunch and all that kind of stuff. But, Terry was somebody Dad, really looked after and really took that to heart to help him and to be somebody that Terry could lean on. I think Terry needed that too at that time. He did struggle there for a few years. And if you want to make one criticism of Chuck Noll, you could probably say, and I think he's even admitted it, in some interviews I saw before his passing, is maybe it was a little bit too hard on Terry, at the start of his career. And, Dad taught Terry how to read plays, give him somebody to, if there was a play call or something like that to, help him with that kind of stuff. And, Terry, really respected Dad and cared about him. And I think that it was mutual between the two of them. And, that carried all the way through Dad's life. I mean, I remember, must have been like 6 months or so before he died. It was the season before he passed away. And I remember, Terry was on his pregame show or something like that. And, Terry was making fun of himself. Like he goes back and forth with Terry between either being the most arrogant former QB and the QB who makes fun of himself all the time. But he was making fun of himself and Dad was just so mad. He said, I'm going to have to call Terry and tell him to stop saying that shit about himself. Because, he was just kind of, like that with Terry. He would get mad when they'd mention, Joe Montana. Like I would just say that I would argue with him about Joe Montana versus Terry Bradshaw. But whenever they'd mention quarterbacks and they wouldn't mention Terry, Dad would take that very personally. So Dad really liked Terry and cared about him a lot.
Wow. That's awesome. Mike, you got anything? I've been asking all the questions here.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Garrett, I mean, did you get to see when they nominated your dad to the NFL's Top 100? I think he was 68th overall. Did you get to see that?
I did. I had no idea about it. And then, somebody sent me the YouTube clip that was, I can't remember how many years ago that was, but I did see that. And that was surprising because, if you go back and you look from, pretty much when my dad retired in 91 up until probably 2005 or 2007, Dad really wasn't included in anything when it came to, those he would be from, of course, it's a different day and age back then. It's not like now where every season they do a, top 100 this or 75 highlight videos and stuff. Back then you got the year-end highlights of your team, and it was usually a 30 to 45 minute cassette tape, and that was it. That was the end of the season highlight reel. But that was the first thing I can remember of seeing Dad featured on something, with the, I guess you could say, the NFL approval or partnership or whatever. And I was glad to see, because obviously, there's a lot of things with my dad post-retirement that are about his personal life or health or whatever. But I also like to see the fact that he's still remembered too as a football player, because that was, my dad's life's work, and his grandkids and stuff like that. When they Google him or search him or whatever, I like that they can see him strong and big and out there on the offensive line, and guys like Joe Green and former players talking about him with respect, and that was something that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I see that you took care of your dad when you were a teenager in his last year. Is that, I think, when you moved back to Pittsburgh?
I moved back. Well, not back, but I guess you could say back out to Pittsburgh between my freshman and sophomore year. So I lived with my dad for pretty much the last 3 years of his life there, and that was, unfortunately, obviously, he passed away, but I think every boy wants to spend time with their dad and learn things, and kind of have that growing up time and that alone time with them and stuff like that. And I don't want to say I took care of him, because it's not like he was an invalid or something like that.
Right.
But I mean, sure, I had to remind him of stuff and everything like that, but it was like living with my best friend, and that was still one of the happiest times of my life, despite how difficult things were at the time. Getting to spend that time with my dad and stuff like that, and I treasure those memories greatly.
Well, I think that was honorable and awesome. So it sounds like your dad was to you guys was a dad first, which is all you can ask.
Oh yeah, no, it was that was his his thing. He Mom would say that's what he loved is he loved to be a dad. And that's something that he definitely passed down to us kids. And stuff like that, and the importance of family and treating people with respect and understanding and hearing them out and talking to them and, stuff like that. And, there's a lot of great lessons that I learned from my dad, just like, every, whether they mean to or not, every son or daughter takes lessons from their parents, and, sometimes you don't recognize it at the time. And there's been a lot of things since my dad's passed away where I now realize, oh, that's what he was trying to tell me, or that's what he was trying to, well, I think they call it impart on me. And,
absolutely,
it just makes me treasure those times in my relationship with him even more.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we'll let you get back to your game or whatever you're doing.
Hey, I'm gonna take care of this guy. He's walking around like he owns the place. So gotta smack
we really
him around
appreciate
a little
it,
bit.
Garrett. And we hope to meet you
anytime.
sometime, wherever in the area.
Absolutely. Just let me know. We'll meet for a beer.
That sounds great. We owe you one. Thanks, sir.
All right.
you.
Thanks, Garrett.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, buddy.
Bye.